There's a particular silence that precedes every great storm in a person's life. It's not a peaceful silence. It's heavy, dense, as if the air itself knows what's about to happen. My personal storm didn't begin with a shout or a slammed door. It began with the almost inaudible buzz of a phone vibrating on a wooden nightstand. At 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, many imagine that the sound that shatters a relationship is a text notification from someone else. A clandestine declaration of love, a forbidden photo. But what I found on that screen, glowing in the darkness of the room, was none of that. It was something infinitely more calculated, colder, and in a way I would only understand later, much more expensive. That little light in the darkness didn't reveal a betrayal of the heart. It revealed a betrayal of the most fundamental trust two people can build. The kind of betrayal that comes signed on letterhead and with a contract number. And it was there, in that instant, that the woman I was began to disintegrate so that the woman I needed to be could finally be born. This isn't a story about the end of a love affair. It's about the true cost of trust, and the discovery that the greatest asset a woman can ever have is her own sovereignty. If stories like this resonate with you, and you believe in the power of transformation, like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. I was always the organizer, the planner. From the beginning of our life together, I was the one with the spreadsheets, the budgets, the bills always paid 5 days before they were due. He found it amusing, calling it my superpower. To me, it was simply the language of care. I believed, with the faith of a true devotee, that a relationship was a merger, a total partnership where mine and yours should dissolve into a comfortable ours, our money, our home, our dreams. We trusted each other so completely that the idea of separating our finances felt like an offense, a bad omen. I gave him the bank password like you'd give someone a key to your house. I managed everything, but the access was his as much as it was mine. I saw this as the pinnacle of transparency, the ultimate proof that we had nothing to hide. Over time, he grew comfortable in that freedom. He'd say I was better with numbers, that he felt lost in a sea of invoices and investments. And I believed him. I believed my control was a form of love, a service to our union. I didn't realize that by taking on the entire burden, I was also taking on all the liability, leaving him free not just from worry, but from accountability. The therapist and author Esther Perel talks about the tension between love and desire, between togetherness and individuality. She argues that even in the most intimate relationship, each person needs to maintain their own secret garden, their own space of sovereignty. Today, I understand the depth of that. I wasn't just taking care of our finances. I was, without knowing it, funding my own invisibility. I was building a structure of trust so blind that it kept me from seeing that for him, our money was slowly becoming the capital to finance his own secret dreams. And I was about to discover I wasn't in them. The first signs weren't notes in a pocket or lipstick stains. They were discrete lines on an Excel spreadsheet. Small charges at expensive restaurants, which he'd justify as crucial business lunches to close a new deal. Wanting to believe in his success, which was our success, I accepted it. Then came purchases from designer stores, which he'd explain away as gifts for important clients. You have to spend money to make money, he'd say with a smile, and I'd nod, proud of the ambitious man I shared my life with. The dissonance began subtly. A comment he made over dinner about the importance of having liquid assets. I found the term odd, too formal for a casual conversation between a couple. Another time, he mentioned a friend who had bought a sports car and said, with a different kind of glint in his eye, "It must be an incredible feeling, having something that powerful all to yourself." I didn't connect the dots. To me, they were just loose comments, the daydreams of a hopeful man. Denial is a powerful force. It makes us construct convenient narratives so that reality doesn't shatter the comfortable world we've built. If you've ever felt that kind of clarity born from pain, support our channel with a like. Your support allows us to keep telling these stories of empowerment. The near miss came on a Sunday afternoon. We were on the couch, and his phone, which was next to me, lit up with an email notification. The sender was a luxury car dealership. My heart sank. Before I could process it, He grabbed the phone with feline speed, let out a forced laugh, and said, "Wow, these people don't give up. You do one search online out of curiosity and they chase you forever." He kissed my forehead and changed the subject, and I, desperately wanting that to be the truth, felt a wave of relief. A sick kind of relief. The kind you feel when you choose to go back to sleep instead of checking on the strange noise you heard downstairs. I chose to believe, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. Little did I know, at that very moment, the truth was no longer knocking at the door. It was already inside, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. Tuesday, 2:17 in the morning. The world was silent, his breathing beside me, deep and steady. The buzz of my phone on the nightstand was a sharp cut through that peace. My eyes struggled to focus on the screen. It was a notification from my credit monitoring app. I used it to keep an eye on my score, something I did almost as a hobby. But this message was different. It wasn't a monthly report. It was an alert. The words were few, but each one landed like a ton of bricks. Security alert. A new credit inquiry has been made in your name for a high-value vehicle financing. The air left my lungs. My blood ran cold. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the phone and opened the app. There it was. Irrefutable, concrete, an approved loan in our joint names, with a scheduled debit from our main account. The amount was obscene. The dealership's name was the same one from that email he had dismissed as spam. In that instant, time stopped. The sound of his breathing became a distant, irritating noise. I looked at his peaceful, sleeping face, the face of the man I had built a life with, and I felt no urge to scream. I didn't feel the explosion of rage I always imagined I'd feel in a situation like this. I felt something much deeper and more frightening. A detachment. It was as if a surgeon had, with a scalpel of ice, severed the cord connecting my heart to his. The pain was immense, but it was a silent, internal pain. Gabor Mat, a physician who studies trauma, says that trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. And what happened inside me was a death. The death of the naive woman who believed in financial fairy tales. And on her grave, something else was beginning to take shape. A coldness, a clarity, a strategy. I didn't wake him. I slid out of bed with the care of a thief, grabbed my laptop, and went downstairs to the living room. The house was dark, but my mind had never been so bright. I allowed myself to cry for exactly 10 minutes. Silent, desolate tears. It was a productive grief, a rite of passage. When the last tear dried, I opened the computer. The pain was still there, a black hole in my chest, but now it had a companion: determination. My mind, the one he so often praised for being good with numbers and organization, began to work at high speed. I wasn't thinking about revenge. That was a hot, messy emotion. I was thinking about justice, about rebalancing the scales. I went to our small office and pulled a metal box from the back of the closet. The box of important documents: marriage, birth, property deeds. And there, at the very bottom, was a dusty envelope that hadn't been opened in nearly a decade. Inside it was a power of attorney we had signed when we bought our first apartment. A formality, the bank manager had told us, in case one of us was traveling and the other needed to sign something important. A power of attorney that, according to a specific clause, applied to any movable or immovable property acquired jointly. A clause I remembered, and one I was sure he had completely forgotten. I spent the rest of the night in a silent, productive frenzy. I scanned the document. I emailed a lawyer I knew, scheduling an emergency online consultation for the next morning. I started to draw up a plan. Brené Brown says that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the birthplace of courage and creativity. That night, my greatest vulnerability, the blind trust that led me to this situation, became the fuel for the most courageous and creative act of my life. He had no idea, but while he slept the sleep of the righteous, on the other side of the house, a new architect was being born. And she was no longer building his dream. She was designing the demolition of a lie and laying the foundation of her own freedom. The days that followed were a masterclass in acting. I kept to the routine. The morning coffee, the goodbye kiss, the questions about his day. He, in turn, was euphoric, buzzing with the energy of someone keeping a delicious secret. He talked about the future, about a big surprise he was preparing. For us, every word was a knife twisting in my wound, but I smiled. My smile was my armor. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, my lawyer and I worked quickly. The power of attorney was legal, irrefutable. The transfer of ownership for the newly acquired vehicle was filed. All of it silent, all of it legal. Friday arrived. He got dressed with special care. He said he had to take care of an important thing and might be a while. "This is the day of our big break," he said, giving me a kiss that made my stomach turn. I just nodded. "Have a great day." He left, and I stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the street. I didn't feel anxiety. I felt the calm of a chess player who has just positioned her queen for checkmate. He came back 3 hours later. I heard him enter the house, but not like other times. The door slammed shut. His footsteps were heavy, furious. He appeared in the living room, his face pale, his eyes flashing with a mix of panic and rage. "The car," he said, his voice choked. "The car is gone." I went to pick it up from the dealership and they said the ownership was transferred this morning, that there was a mistake. I faced him, keeping my expression neutral. I stood up from the couch, walked to the coffee table, and picked up an envelope. I handed it to him. "There was no mistake," I said, in the calmest voice I have ever had. "It's not gone. It's safe." The ownership was transferred to the majority shareholder of our partnership. It was a business decision to protect our primary asset. And our primary asset, darling, is me. The transformation was complete. In that moment, he didn't see the woman who organized his bills. He saw the CEO of her own life, who had just executed a hostile takeover to save the company of her heart from total bankruptcy. I never saw him again after that day. The dissolution of our union was swift and on my part painless. The car, that shiny, expensive symbol of his betrayal, I sold a week later. I never drove it once. Looking at it felt like looking at a beautifully polished lie. I used part of the money to rent a new apartment, a place that was only mine, whose keys only I held. The other part I invested, not in the stock market, but in something far more profitable. Financial education for women who, like me, had learned to take care of everything except themselves. That money, born from pain and disappointment, became the seed capital for my freedom and that of many others. The experience left me with 3 fundamental lessons, which I now share like commandments. The first is that trust and transparency in a relationship should never mean surrendering your autonomy. Having separate accounts, individual passwords, and a clear understanding of your finances isn't a sign of distrust. It's a sign of self-respect and a healthy partnership between 2 whole individuals, not 2 halves. The second lesson is that your financial well-being is one of the most concrete forms of self-love. Learning to invest, to save, to understand a contract isn't just about accumulating wealth. It's about building a future where you never have to depend on someone else's goodwill or honesty for your safety and your peace. And the third, perhaps the most important of all, is that the most powerful reaction to a great betrayal isn't always immediate confrontation. Sometimes power lies in silence, in strategy, in conscious action, responding instead of reacting. It's in that space that you stop being the victim of someone else's story and become the author of your own. Healthy relationships aren't about finding someone who will never hurt you. That's a fantasy. They're about becoming someone who, when hurt, knows exactly how to heal, how to protect themselves, and most importantly, how to use the stones in the road to build a castle. If you feel invisible in your relationship today, remember, you don't need permission to take the wheel of your own life. Sometimes, all you need is a notification in the dead of night to remind you of who you really are. If this story inspired you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to join a community that turns pain into power. Because every story shared is a map for someone still trying to find their way back to themselves.